just doing charcuterie, in my eyes, probably wouldn't constitute a bona fide eating establishment. Does that
Yeah, it's
seem
kind of a
accurate?
fine line in having to really kind of justify that with your menu and kind of proving that you're providing more than just a snack. And other things that can benefit the business. It gives you the opportunity to now offer pairings or even paired recommendations. So someone that may not have only drinks an IPA, but you have this dish that you recommend to have with your blonde ale or with your Belgian beer, maybe you can provide that as like a smaller sample size to them. So now they're maybe trying a beer that they may not have otherwise when they've got food paired with it, and they kind of really see the difference in the different styles, and that could expand what you can sell to them.
You are listening to the Capital Craft Podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I am your host, Eric Fowler.
And I'm Jeff Fox from Beer Media Co.
And today we sit down with our good friend, Dustin. Dustin, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do in the beer industry?
Yep. Thank you. My name is Dustin Hauck. I'm an architect. We specialize in craft brewery projects, particularly any kind of craft beverage, bars and restaurants as well. So thanks for having me.
So today we're going to be covering something that's really relevant, whether it's built into somebody's business plan over the next couple of years or something that they're heavily considering or being asked about, even if they don't want to. We're going to be talking about installing a kitchen, whether it's a new build, and that's a big part of what their business is, or it's an established tap room that wants to build what they offer their guests.
Yeah. I think the big question for me is like, why would someone want to install a kitchen into their brewery? Just generally.
I think a lot of times they're looking to expand their offerings. It allows them also to supply outside beer and wine so they can diversify what they're serving. And it's something that can help maybe keep patrons there longer and another revenue generators potentially.
Is this pretty common generally when you're being approached by breweries? Are you being asked often on what it takes to install a kitchen in a brewery? Or when people are building out, is it something that you suggest they look at? How does that process go when it comes to a brewery and planning or somebody established when they approach?
I think in general, any new brewery that we work on, I always encourage it, or at least provide some provisions so it'd be much easier to add one later. But we're being tasked quite a bit, most recently with adding kitchens, or even when they're doing a satellite tap room, adding a food component to that as well.
Beautiful. Who do you think are the right people to add a kitchen, and who do you think are the wrong people to add a kitchen to their brewery?
Well, I think it's important to really understand what adding a kitchen means and how it complicates your business. It's really a completely separate business than the brewery itself. Different staff, different training, and different support. Just like you'd hire a brewer, bringing in a chef to help prepare the menu, understand what you're trying to make, really define what you're trying to provide. No different than on the brewery side, but it's just kind of a different dynamic. And just understanding that it's a different business and making sure that you're prepared for that.
Yeah, I've seen and personally experienced working for and with a couple breweries with kitchens. It can often take two different approaches from the guest standpoint. You can either be a restaurant with a brewery or a brewery with a restaurant, and it changes the impact quite a bit in the fundamentals of the way that brewery is perceived, for better or worse. I think these days we're seeing a lot of restaurant heavy concepts being pushed forward that have some aspect of brewing their own beer. But as we know from the business side, it's very difficult. I mean, it's difficult to hit your margins on beer too, but oftentimes your beverage program's really still what is the driving factor for profitability for a lot of these breweries.
Yeah, we see even big hotels or bigger restaurants, their biggest revenue generator is alcohol sales. A lot of times their restaurant food sales are a break-even point, and that they make their margins on all the alcohol that they sell. So kind of understanding that, not necessarily maybe as a separate, completely revenue generator, but a way to increase your alcohol sales.
Interesting. I know I come from a marketing background, and so I know also branding wise, you can really like brand your place as kind of one of those, restaurant and brewery kind of locations. And if you do a really good job on the food, it can actually kind of, set your brand a little bit, right? So I know that, like, what are some good examples of this? Like Craft Coast, maybe, where they like have really lean into like the Mexican lagers, and then they have, tacos, right? And so it's like the food kind of lends itself to the brand. So I think that's kind of like an interesting aspect of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really kind of understanding what kind of food you want to serve, what's going to go best with your beer product, and how you want to serve it. Because there's lots of different service models: full service, sit down, walk up, take a number. There's all kinds of different ways to do it, and that can impact how we lay out the kitchen too, and how that service model is going to work and what the food is. And is the food secondary or is it part of it? Are you going into what is seemingly the old brew pub model, or are you a brewery that happens to have a kitchen? And so, thinking about how you want to incorporate that and how it may change your overall operations.
So let's look at, let's make up a case study here and say that we are a brewery that has multiple tap rooms. One of our tap rooms is doing okay, but is fairly empty and has additional space that we, wanted to put another small pilot system in, but maybe we have space for a kitchen. Would it be advantageous to come with a concept in mind, or look at the space, see what we have, potential for with that build out, and then develop a concept in that, kind of the chicken or the egg?
I think it's a little bit of both. They kind of happen at the same time. So bringing someone like us in to really look at the space, what the potential is, how much space you have, because a lot of times your menu can be dictated by the square footage you have to work with. And then understanding whether that's going to be a hood kitchen. If you're going to have a full hood, a grease trap's pretty much going to be required for anything. So how can we get that incorporated in? And those need to be outside. Different ways to kind of get that in and see what that space is best going to accommodate. And then also considering what your budget is going to be, because adding a hood is going to add cost to the overall project.
Yeah.
But it does expand your menu as well.
At White Labs, we installed a hoodless kitchen that used ventless equipment, primarily
2 ventless appliances before a hood is required.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ventless options now. If you really look into it, they're just very expensive. You can get a ventless fryer, you can get a ventless flat top.
Understand the speed at which those cook as well, because if you get a really busy tap room and you get a ventless fryer, you get 10 orders of fries that come in at the same time. The people on the 3rd and 4th order aren't going to get their food for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we ran a ventless conveyor pizza oven, similar to the Lincoln models that you see at Pizza Port, just a lot smaller. And there were a lot of pros and cons to that, but even a concept like that should be on the lower end of impact to the business and the financial investment still becomes pretty expensive.
Now is a harder time than ever for breweries to navigate the rapidly changing market, but Beer Media Co. is here to help. As a proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild, we are a full-service digital marketing and content creation company that works with San Diego breweries to reach new customers and create amazing engagement for their websites and social media accounts. If you are a small brewery owner trying to figure out the whole social media thing, or a larger brewery looking to up their engagement, send us a message at info@beermedia.co, because we know SD Beer.
Attention brewing professionals, are you looking to elevate your presence in the heart of San Diego's craft beer industry? Consider joining the San Diego Brewers Guild as a professional or affiliate member today. Access exclusive benefits designed to propel your craft to new heights. Gain entry to premier industry events and educational resources, and forge vital connections within our brewing community. Visit sdbeer.com to explore the full list of advantages that a membership offers. Join the Capital of Craft podcast and the San Diego Brewers Guild, celebrating craft beer in San Diego since 1997. If I have 20, 40 grand, can I build something out that would allow me to serve some food? You hear a lot, well, I'm just going to serve paninis or something simple, right? And there are a lot of concepts that do really well with that. But once you start going down that rabbit hole, in my experience, you often see, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, then I need to do this. And if I'm going to do that, well, okay, now I need 3 sinks in that kitchen as required by the health department. Where am I going to put 3 sinks in a very small area? Where am I going to put my mop? Like just this silly things. Could you maybe walk through what?
Yeah. I mean, if someone came to me with a budget for $40,000 to build a kitchen, I would tell them that's not going to work. Because the Help Mart is going to require at a minimum, as I mentioned, a grease trap. You're going to need a 3-compartment sink. You're going to need a hand sink, and you're going to need a prep sink. Just those things alone and the infrastructure that goes into place, plus if you're going to do ventless appliances, so maybe they're electric, the infrastructure that it takes to put those together could put you in the $80,000 to $100,000 range for the construction alone, not including the equipment itself. So once you add that in, it's going to be really hard pressed to make a kitchen work for much smaller than that. And there are some other requirements for the California Health Food Code and also within San Diego County that require additional space. San Diego County requires 96 linear foot of dry storage. So that can take up space. You thought, I can just fit all this in a 5x5 room. Well, you can, but worried about all the dry storage that's required. That also has to have the washable surfaces on the walls and the ceilings and everything else.
So it can't be in another room.
It could be in another room, but it's got to have the same washable finishes that are in the main kitchen.
You can't hide it, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and so you say, well, I only have this much space. Well, you're going to be limited on what you can do because they require that amount of shelving, period. And so you kind of run into those things. And there's other requirements, such as like if you have a big roll-up door in your tap room, you can't have an open kitchen. It's mainly for pest control, so flies aren't coming in the door, flying all the way into the kitchen. You're allowed a 216 square inch pass-through opening that has to have a self-closing screen on it. So those are some of the things that can really kind of wreak havoc in an initial idea.
Yeah. With the self-closing pass window is something that they commented on when we built our kitchen out, and then through experience they come back and never really look at again. So it's interesting sometimes what one inspector will harp on and the other one won't.
The majority of that enforcement is on the initial build out and the plan check, the build out, and then the initial inspection. And then what happens after, they do come back and do periodic inspections. And I have seen them bring that up on places that have maybe changed what they did and now it doesn't comply. And now the health department is making them comply with it.
Yeah. The shelving though is no joke. I mean, that it is a lot more space than I think. Even the cost of the shelves is very expensive. And sometimes you can find things used, but it adds up quick. And, you need dedicated, like a dedicated prep table. And there's just a lot of little silly things that don't seem like it's that much. But when you have a small space, it fills out very quickly.
Yeah, and plumbing and mechanical and electrical work is all
have enough hot water on demand for
right.
it.
You got to have reach certain temperatures at different faucets and within a certain amount of time. And so, all of that infrastructure comes into play and into the budget.
And I think one thing to think about is if you're trying to build something like this out, like it can affect your ongoing business. If you're having to run new plumbing, if you're having to run different things through your location, that could have impacts on your business as well.
Exactly. Understanding what that construction impact may have to the business, because you really want to operate it. You want to keep running the business while you're building this, maybe behind a temporary wall or something. So how can you do that? How can you have contractor access to it while this tap room is still open? Different ways to work around that.
What is the general timeline from an idea to having a service working kitchen? I know there's a lot of variables to that, but I think a lot of expectations aren't always set to what they should be. And you hear about a lot of projects that like, this ended up taking, I've got a restaurant near me in Santee, not beer related. And they've had, paper up on the windows for a year. And it's like, some of it's probably mismanaged and some of it's waiting for inspections, but what's a realistic timeline of having an idea, planning it out, finding the right contractors and subcontractors, ordering the materials, which it's getting a little bit better. You could probably speak to that more than me, but and then actually hiring and training staff and getting it open. What does that look like in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, on the fastest way that I've really ever seen it could be from initial concept to permit in hand in that 6-month range. And
in San Diego?
Yeah. And that's super fast. So that's extremely rare. So this is the absolute fastest. And I, hear people tell me that, so-and-so said I could get it done and open in 6 months. And I'm like, all right, let me see it. Cause it just isn't going to happen. But anywhere from 4 to 6 months from concept to permit in hand. And then you're going to have 4 to 6 months of construction. So you're still talking about 8 to 12 months minimum just to get open. And then you add in anything like partners or indecision or making decisions. Maybe it's that initial call to us to come look at it. We look at it, we give you some options, you play with different ideas, different menus. That could take months in it by itself. And then coming up with a decision, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to move forward with. Now you start that timeline that I just mentioned from there. So, and then different cities have different turnaround times on the plan check, whether it's through City of San Diego or through the county. You still got to go through separately through the health department, the fog and grease programs. You've got to go through a lot of different departments to get approved before you can start doing any work of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to get your contractor hired and do that construction. While all that's happening, you still need to be maybe further refining your menu in your program and getting staff ready and getting, all that up to speed. So 1 year is pretty aggressive from start to open.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any things that you can do to kind of expedite that? Like if you go into it already having like a concept in mind, if you like, are there certain concepts that are a little quicker than others? Anything in your opinion that you can do to kind of have it on the low, like how does someone get it on the lower end of that range basically?
Make decisions quickly and
Yeah.
stick with those decisions. Don't
Fair.
change
Sure.
them.
Yeah, that's fair.
We get
And
that
have
a lot of
everybody
times
that's
that-
involved in the project there at the beginning,
Yeah.
and don't bring them in halfway through. But that's everything.
And
not just
don't
this.
change it. I mean, we get into these models where, okay, we're going to do a pizza kitchen and we're like halfway through the process. Say, you know what? I want to add smash burgers too. Well, that's completely different. I mean, that's a different equipment, different everything. It changes everything. And so we're really backtracking at that point. And they say, well, how about we just add this little thing? There is no such thing as adding a little thing and not really having an impact. They all have impacts. We've had projects that say, we decided to pick different equipment than what was on the plan. Is that going to be a problem? Yes, it is. The health department once installed what's on the plan. And so having to make a change to that equipment, it's going to add time to it.
Yeah, and they do require a specific list
Yes.
of the make and model of that equipment too.
Correct.
Yeah. So, when somebody's planning a build out, is there anything they can do? Say I'm building a tap room. I don't know if I want a kitchen and a tap room brewery. Is there a way to dedicate space or oversize certain utilities or things to consider in case you ever changed your mind? Whether you want to build an event space or a kitchen or expand your brewery, like what can be done to be forward thinking?
If you've got a way to potentially expand a waistline over to that area and plan how you might add a grease trap, which would be another waistline that would go outside of the building to the grease trap and then back and reconnect to that other waistline. Having that in mind, extending that waistline, maybe bringing a water line over, maybe bringing a gas line over to that space, having a space kind of designated and pre-plumbed, at least for point of connections, so you're not having to trench all the way back to something through the tap room or into the brewery that's going to disrupt operations later. You can bring a lot of those utilities in. And if you might have a all gas fired kitchen or an all electric kitchen, you can, as I said, bring that gas line over, or maybe think about that when you're planning your electrical loads and adding, 100 to 200 amps capacity just for that kitchen, for that future capacity, or having a way to expand that easily.
Mm-hmm. And that logic's probably the same on the brew house cellar side too, right?
Yeah. So when we do breweries, we always plan for expansion. So we'll design the cellar basically to keep it as least disruption to the brewing process as possible. So typically you're not going to change your brew house. You're just going to brew faster. And so you need added cellar capacity. So we design that cellar to meet that maximum demand. So really all you got to do for a brewery is just add more fermentation capacity. You may also need to do like dry storage and cold storage. It may or may not fit on that site, that may be offsite, but that can be managed. But when it comes to the kitchen, it's really got to be that dedicated space and having utilities nearby to tap into, so there's as least disruption to everything else. Because there's really no reason to fully plumb everything out, because your menu might change. You may decide now you want to do sandwiches, in 6 months or a year from now, you want to do burgers, or you want to do pizza, or you want to do something else. That's going to change what equipment, what connections are. Just bring those utilities over to that area. Isn't that expensive to just plan for it, put a line in, cap it, and have it there in case you want to tap into it later?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about it's way more expensive than you think when you're starting. It takes a lot longer than people start when they're starting.
Positives.
Like,
What are the
yeah,
positives?
like, are there things like working with an experienced organization like yourself? I've read that you did almost 250 different projects or something.
We've done quite a few brewery
You know,
projects,
working
yeah.
like
Most of
with
them
an organization with,
restaurants.
and then what kind of positives do people kind of get? Like, have you seen have you been able to hear the other side of it about like how much it's increased their beer sales or anything like that on the other side. I think the flip side, the positives of this.
I think it's really kind of coming into it with a realistic expectation of time and cost, and then also having a clear vision on what you want to provide. Because there's sort of different tiers of kitchens. You can have just a bare minimum kind of charcuterie kitchen where most things are pre-prepared. You're not doing a whole lot of prep work on site. You're just doing like sandwiches, something easy. Then you can add a small cooking component, whether that's a pizza, 2 ventless appliances being pizza ovens or small things. Panini would count for that. Or if you want to go with a full-blown kitchen with a full hood, there's kind of tiers to that. And really kind of having that clear what you want to do and how far you want to go with it, and sticking with that plan. Or if you're going to deviate, understand the cost and time impact to that.
Is that something that, if someone's trying to decide and come up with that plan, they should reach out earlier than later in that process to start talking to?
I mean, I always encourage them to reach out to us as early as before they even, like when they first look at a space, or even before they look at a space, we can kind of define for them what they should be looking for in a space. And not that any of those deficiencies will be prohibitive or won't work for the project, but understand the cost to bring that utility or service in, so that that's in the budget early and you're not getting hit with a big budget hit item later that you weren't expecting. We try to avoid surprises.
Support for this episode comes from BSG, proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild and wholly owned subsidiary of the RAR Corporation. With the select ingredients, industry experience, and dedicated customer service you need to create outstanding beers, BSG is ready to assist you in everything from recipe formulation to troubleshooting. Located within easy reach of most breweries, BSG serves San Diego area brewers from Oceanside, California. Become a customer today at bsgcraftbrewing.com.
I mean, some of the positives from a guest experience standpoint, though, are obviously, people spend more time in your establishment when they're able to eat. You're able to diversify your beverage list, right? In California, if you're a bona fide eating establishment under Type 23, you can offer guest beers and wine, which is pretty great and really allows a lot more opportunity. Now, we heard this spoken about a lot during COVID, but what constitutes a bona fide eating establishment is really based on the menu. And I don't know if you're more familiar than I am with what defines a menu, but it was pretty gray from a lot of my experience on what a real menu was. And they're looking for, an entree-ish item and some sides and some appetizers, but just doing charcuterie in my eyes probably wouldn't constitute a bona fide eating establishment. Is that seem
kind
accurate?
Of a fine line in having to really kind of justify that with your menu and kind of proving that you're providing more than just a snack. And other things that can benefit the business. It gives you the opportunity to now offer pairings or even paired recommendations. So someone that may not have, only drinks an IPA, but you have this dish that you recommend to have with your blonde ale or with your Belgian beer, maybe you can provide that as like a smaller sample size to them. So now they're maybe trying a beer that they may not have otherwise when they've got food paired with it, and they kind of really see the difference in the different styles, and that could expand, what you can sell to them.
You're just saying that adding a couple bags of chips in the back or a popcorn machine or something like that doesn't count as a...
No.
That's great.
I'm sure some people will consider that a meal, but not the health department and the ABC.
Yeah, and when it, the considerations when it comes to staffing, and even when you're going through this process, they require somebody to be, what was it, a safe surf,
food safety certified.
Yeah, as a manager, and that
Right.
program takes about 10 hours to complete.
Right.
And you can't get some of these items checked off this list until somebody's on site for that. So, even though you might not be the one that's ever in the kitchen, you might want to have somebody on staff ahead of time, kind of realize that. And
Because someone that's certified has to be on site all the time.
Mhm.
So you got to make sure that staff is available, or you can't be serving the food.
Yeah.
Is this is maybe a dumb question, but like when it comes to being able to get a liquor license for a place like that, is having the food on the menu also a bonus for that? Or, I don't exactly know how that works, but
Long time ago, it used to be that way, but
Mhm.
breweries kind of fall under a different licensing model. unless you're trying to do full liquor, that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, breweries have less ABC and licensing issues than other alcoholic beverage establishments. And I think nowadays it's not as bad as it used to be, but hard liquor definitely changes things.
So before we wrap up, like what are the, 3 tidbits of advice you would suggest somebody starts thinking about now when they're considering how to expand their business down the road with potentially adding a food component?
I think it's just making sure that the space can accommodate it square footage wise and utility wise. Understanding kind of what your menu might be, what kind of foods you want to provide, and talk to an architect and a builder early to get a realistic budget and time frame. And the budget should include not only the design and engineering and permits, but also the construction, the equipment itself, and the finishes in that space, and then also include in there budgets for bringing in a chef or some sort of restaurant training that can really help you understand how a business works, because the restaurant is not the same as a tap room, and it's really a different staff, different operations, different business than what you may be used to.
As you mentioned, bringing in, your types of services really early, I would suggest bringing in, if you are going to bring in an outside chef or a restaurant consultant, bring them in at the same time, because the way you design things and the type of equipment you pick, you might not realize that you can only do, so many tickets on a certain piece of equipment, and your tap room's oversized for that. And those are just things you want to think about.
Yeah, understanding how many plates you want to be able to turn, how fast the equipment can do that. I mean, even something as simple as just a pizza kitchen, there's multiple different types of equipment you can purchase depending on how fast and what type of pizza you're trying to make. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to make a pizza kitchen." Well, is that thin crust? Is it deep dish? Is it New York style, Chicago style? There's all different kinds of ways. And how are you mixing your dough? Are you making the dough on site? Is it rising on site? Are you buying pre-made dough? That changes how we lay everything out and how it's established. And so, having those same sort of things figured out, having that chef in there that can really explain to you the differences between those different models and what that means on an operations side can help you kind of get you going in the right direction.
Yeah. Are there any last considerations on cold room space? I mean, there's a lot of reach-ins that you need to install reach-in and a freezer, and
so it depends on your menu as well, and whether you need freezers or not. But a lot of that can be accomplished with reach-ins. It's a little bit simpler as far as it's one piece of equipment goes. If you're going to do a walk-in, that is going to require a separate condenser and kind of the added complexity of that. I just would say, please don't use your beer cooler for food storage. I've seen it done, and it's never been pretty.
Because it's not approved from the health code, or it just, you have 2 departments fighting over space?
Basically, yeah, a little bit of that, and that beer coolers, all the beer is already self-contained, and so the outsides of kegs aren't necessarily as clean as the rest of everything around there. And when you start competing for space with bins of, say, onions, you don't necessarily want those in the same place where kegs are. And I understand there are businesses that do it and can keep it separate and clean. It's just difficult to do and to do well. If you can, I highly recommend to keep cold storage food and beer separate.
Yeah, I would say in my sales rep days, more often than not, beer bars would share a cold box with the kitchen.
Yeah, beer bars do all the time. But if you're in a brewery situation and you have the opportunity to keep them separate, it makes a big difference in cleanliness and your food storage sanitation.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. Let everybody know where they can find more information about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, we're on all the socials, but our website is just hauckarchitecture.com. You can look us up, reach out to us anytime. We can help anybody with pre-planning and design and permitting and get their restaurant kitchen added to their brewery or tap room.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for watching the Capital of Craft podcast, brought to you by the Brewers Guild. My name is Jeff Fox, and if you want to follow us on social media, it's at SD Brewers, and we hope to see you watch all these different episodes and learn as much as you can about the beer industry.
Cheers.
Thank you.